So we've talked about a few questions, and we will only share a few of those because we sense there's a real eager from the audience to ask questions to these after these amazing presentations. So as Kati said, I'm Tanya. I'm just going to explain briefly what Skånes Dansteater is. We are a repertory company in Malmö, south of Sweden, around 30 staff and around 16 to 18 dancers that work on a full-time contract. And since 2012, we've been working mainly with the question who, the representation on stage and who belongs on stage, and working specifically with dancers with disabilities and in various ways. And we also, the last year, had the scheme Dance for Parkinson, which I really enjoyed your presentation. I really relate to that. When we started in January 2016, we had 4 people, and the rumor spread. 2 weeks later, in the workshop, was 60 people. So it's been going like that for every 2 weeks since then. So it's really a group that spread the marketing. So as a repertory company, our way into thinking about inclusion, I mean, if you describe Canduco as traditional, I don't even know what to describe Skånes Dansteater as. But I was very inspired by Scottish Dance Theatre, which is a very similar setup to Skånes Dansteater in the UK. It's also a repertory company, a bit smaller, but the artistic director at Scottish Dance Theatre, at the time when we had a collaboration with them, Janet Smith, she opened a conference very similar to this with the question, what if art directors and casting agents could choose from professionally trained performing talent representing the whole of our society? What if we could hear everybody's stories and add real breadth of choice and range of life experience to the future of artistic leadership? Can we empower ourselves to collaborate to achieve that future? So for me, working within an institution, that is kind of the guide for me. You know, what is the kind of little steps we can do every day to empower ourselves to reach that future? And it kind of leads us into the first question that we've been discussing. So are these are integrated companies, inclusive companies, dancers with companies that define themselves dancers with and without disabilities? Are there a goal, or is it just a means of development? So Stina, would you like to elaborate on that question?
Yes, so it's a good thing we had this discussion yesterday, so I can be a bit clearer this morning. Because, of course, I think for Canduco, when the company started, there wasn't anyone else who did that in the UK. Now there's many more choreographers, projects, other companies that are also working with disabled, non-disabled dancers. And in a way, that's what we want. And Pedro, who I work with, was at one time said, really, in a way, everybody could work inclusively or can work in this way. We just maybe go out of our way a little bit more to make this happen by kind of going out, reaching in, getting people. So, but ultimately, we should be desolate. We should be not needed, in the sense that, as Janet said, if people had the experience, choreographers would just choose people for what expression they have to bring to their work. And in that sense, yes, we are just, in one way, a means to getting there. We're just a company putting a bit of attention on this and hopefully getting other people aware of it and wanting to do similar things. But ultimately, our dancers, my aim is that our dancers can go and work with anybody if they would like. And it's up to them whether they would like to or not. But actually, maybe the reality is at this moment in time that it isn't actually as clear a choice as that still, because of the attention to it, because there's not as many people that are doing it. So, yes, in answer to your question, I think we are hoping that we are generating more trained dancers through our work, which ultimately can go out and be with anybody. And I'm not sure whether I think that every company, must have disabled dancers. I think it should be the choice to do that. But the choice can only be there if there's a reality of training and experience.
Have you got any thoughts on that, Joe?
No, nothing that I can articulate, but yeah, I agree. I'm not interested in some sort of quota or bullying inclusive thing. I don't dare call the Royal Ballet, you know, I don't know what I'm saying. But so I don't know if this is a means or an ends or whatever it is, it's something worthwhile. I don't know. But of course, we know that anybody can hire whoever they want. This is, if you want to hire somebody, do that.
Something else that we talked about, and in our group, and Sophia from Share Music, she mentioned this yesterday in her talk, was the idea of the marketing of certain work. How explicit or implicit do you know, is there a need to address that a certain piece of work or a certain repertoire have dancers that with disabilities, or perhaps dancers that don't fit the audience or our imagined audience perception of what the norm is? Is there, because as at Skånes Dansteater, when we have had dancers with disabilities in a kind of a current repertory, we have made a point of not explicitly making that known to the audience beforehand, or afterwards actually, because often there is not that reaction that we might perceive. But I suppose there are pros and cons to that. But have you got any?
Well, yeah, maybe not. I think we saw in Roberto's presentation just now that there's a real strength and power and ownership of saying Parkinson's class and being specific. And in a way, that's sort of what I was mentioning yesterday, that there's a usefulness in that specific exclusivity. This is a class for Parkinson's. Of course, anybody can come, but that's what it's geared for. Now, this is very different from advertising and marketing from Skånes or Canduco, etc. And you can choose either way. I guess if you're getting too hung up on not showing a disability or making sure to show a disability, you might be thinking about the wrong things, but maybe not.
I think it's important to find a very smart way to inform people and to inspire people with what we program. So I would imagine that according to the context where you present a company or work, it's important to send the best possible information. So I would imagine that in contexts where the kind of inclusive companies or works are more known, it may be easier than other places where maybe they come for the first time. So I would imagine that it's important to tailor this flow of information in the best possible and respectful way.
Yeah, I actually think the same, that it can vary. You know, Transitions, which is the fourth year company at Trinity Lab, and 1 year they had a boy who had one hand missing, but they weren't suddenly saying we're now an inclusive dance company, as in, it doesn't have to be. And the same for Skånes, we are a repertory dance company, that's who we are, and our dancers come in for different things. I guess Canduco made a particular statement when it started, or at the moment it keeps making this statement, and to a certain extent I guess there's even a desire that that's obsolete at some point, but for the time being the specificity is useful in many settings. So I think what it sounds like you do, and I think what some curators do too, the conversation with the artists themselves. And so again, this idea of ownership or control over how we're being spoken about is important.
And also, we talked about role models yesterday. Sindri, that we saw the piece yesterday, he's employed at the moment at Skånes Dansteater in the work that premieres on Saturday, which is why Åsa is not here. And we have obviously been specific in not communicating that he has a visual impairment to the audience. Having said that, we have communicated that to the specific target group that we would like to reach, like the people with visual impairments coming to see the performance with the audio and description, doing a workshop with Sindri before, and also a talk. We had a talk with Sindri just to be able to make sure that they know that there is a strong role model in that piece, that this is something for everyone and not just exclusively for certain bodies. So there is a really delicate balance, I feel, in that. But something else I was thinking about from your presentation also, Stina, you mentioned Unlimited, the scheme Unlimited that happened in 2012, and as I understand it was a kind of a pot of money from the Arts Council where disabled artists could apply money to present work, and has since become a festival at the South Bank. And to my knowledge, it doesn't really exist, that kind of scheme within the Arts Council in Sweden. And is that, I suppose it's also pros and cons with that. I suppose the question is in two parts. I mean, firstly is the pot of money designed specifically for disabled artists to apply for, to make work, and also the kind of the whole notion of the festival, Unlimited, as being a platform for disabled artists to present work and to also have a discussion around that work and to move the process forward. I mean, I've been part of that as a participant in Unlimited, and I must say it's really enriching experience. So it's really, I'm conflicted myself, and I would like to hear your thoughts on that.
I think that it is something that I've been part of a few working groups where we've discussed this quite a lot. You know, do we need to pay particular attention and focus and, you know, use the specificity of a banner of a festival to put, you know, all the work together, or should it just be out there? And I think it has different purposes. And I feel that still today there is sometimes a value in this, because it does draw particular attention and critical mass again, and the sharing of information that may be similar or may be different, but sometimes often has similarity to, you know, artists' experience, maybe of lack of training or lack of opportunities, or, you know. So it still feels in this moment in time that there is a usefulness in the particular focus on giving a pot of money to in a way to push work by disabled artists, and then also a festival. But if that's the only way we present work in this way, then it's not useful, because it becomes a ghetto and it becomes a specific thing. So I think at the moment is a vehicle for bringing attention to and discussion around, and critical discussion around the work. And then ultimately, and as is happening alongside it anyway, there are many disabled artists that are getting funding from the Arts Council in other ways anyway, and that are presenting work in other places as well. So I think in a way at this moment in time it feels useful to have both. There is, at one point, I remember Sadler's Wells took, you know, they had a sort of a festival of work particularly being called Equal Dance, particularly kind of highlighting the work, and that was one season, and the next season they had no particular banner, it was just fed in as part of the programming. So I guess that they are possibly stepping stones, or they're possibly at different times in different contexts useful. So I wouldn't be able to say, I strongly disagree, but I know that also from within Kanduko, of course, there was always a desire from the very beginning, and Adam Benjamin talked about this, you know, don't just bring us in for the disability, you know, bring us in for the artwork that we're presenting, and, you know, don't just highlight that we're this, and you know, but let us be, and then let people judge for themselves. So that's the kind of, I think, the balancing act and the tension between the kind of, let's put this together and let's all gather. And in a way, like Joel said, you know, disability is such a broad thing. So also the works that are being presented by this or made by disabled artists is a whole range. You know, it's not one aesthetic or one thing, which can be interesting within a festival, because you see the diversity then also and realize that it's not one thing. And actually when sometimes when it's being programmed singularly by a venue, suddenly the attention becomes, oh, this is what, you know, work by disabled artists is, you know. So there are definitely pros and cons, and at times, one outweighs the other.
And how is it in Italy?
We are actually starting a small program in April that focuses on, I would say, differences rather than disabilities, because it includes work that deal with identity, gender, and different abilities. But I think from the perspective of a programmer, it's very inspiring and useful to find a focus where you may go and somehow encounter different works, people busy with these themes. And somehow if the works who are somehow generated in this context are good, they will have echoes everywhere in ordinary programs. So I think it becomes a huge opportunity to give resources and time, space for people to really create and for people to gather together and share thoughts about what they see.
Great. So the last question before we open up to the audience, I just want to ask Stina, because you're leaving Canduco after 10 years, so you've created this legacy the last 10 years together with Pedro, and now you're artistic director of Corda in Norway. And so just thinking about now moving from an inclusive company into a mainstream festival, contemporary dance festival, what kind of experiences will you bring and how will you use it in your new role?
Well, I think that Canduco has always wanted to be this bridge between whatever we see as inclusive and mainstream. So I think that's exactly what I feel excited about, taking with me an enormous amount of experience and internal knowledge and seeing works done by lots of different artists and having worked with lots of choreographers and seeing their work change the company or the company change their work. So I guess what I feel like I'm taking is knowledge about different expressions and how art can be expressive in different ways, and that I can take that with a critical mind as well, because I think that that's often, as you were saying about, coming together and seeing things and being aware of what context is best to present things in, or what context gives perspectives to the different works. So I guess I hope that I will bring with me some of this internal knowledge and sort of use that as a way to, make audiences in Norway benefit from seeing different ways of expressing work.
We look forward to that, or for you in Oslo anyway. Okay, so finally, the audience. Any questions?
You can have a microphone maybe. Is there any questions? Here we have at least one question.
Okay. No, the question also comes a little bit from the discussion yesterday, because I learned so much about when you, Joel, and Emilia and the other ones spoke about that is such a specific technique that you need. Every individual needs a specific technique. You also said about every wheelchair is given a special technique. You've worked in Canduco. You've worked with so many different choreographers coming from all over the world. I want you to say something about the complexity and what. I can also imagine that the fear that a choreographer can feel when asked to work with you. Maybe, Roberta, you also have something to say about it, but mainly to Stina and Joel. What is a choreographer facing?
I think it's true that most choreographers are nervous or have some element of fear, and then it takes about 30 seconds for that to disappear. So I've worked with maybe 10 or 11 choreographers in the last 5 years, and all of them have said something similar, and then afterwards or just during, it's like, this actually is not a significantly different process from other dance companies. So that worry quickly dissipates.
Yeah, and I think the interesting thing is if I, seeing, for example, Alexander Whitley made like some really great solo work and duet work together with Joel, and yes, so our way of preparing our choreographers is that we allow some time for research, probably like half a year, or almost a year maybe, before we even decide on a commission, so they can just play in the studio, just be, and in a way bring their nervousness or their fear, to the studio much earlier than when it comes to the pressure of starting to make the work, because I think that, it very quickly transpires what their interests might have been in their head beforehand, and then what works in the studio, and then the skill often is just down to their eye and the movement skills that they have. So, looking at how Alex was working with Joel, and the articulation of the body, and that in connection with how you would use the chair. It's movement physics. It's physics, and the choreographer's interest in how the body functions and how that creates the effect, the cause and effect. So, and I guess might be outside of your question, but I think maybe that's also why, in terms of us commissioning people, we do often tend to get drawn to choreographers that are particularly interested in the body and how the body functions, whether that's for a theatrical purpose or for a more abstract movement purpose. But they do need to, in some way or another, want to engage with the body in front of them, which I guess most choreographers do, because that's the medium of how we work. But that investigation of the physical mechanics is of some kind of interest to them, even if they then distill it. Like someone like Wendy Houston, I'd say, even though her work is quite theatrical, she absolutely starts with the body and the kind of expression of the body. And so it's just how it might be distilled in different ways. Yeah.
I think most choreographers I've worked with, hardly anybody come in with pre-made steps. And I think that's becoming the norm in creating contemporary dances now anyway. Which when I started dancing, I was very surprised at, because it turns out I made the dance.
I think the preparation is very crucial. What I do when I invite artists to encounter the Parkinson's group, I ask them to lead the class without information, because I really trust their intuitions, and most of the times they come out with the most incredible proposals to the Parkinson's dancers. Then there's a second phase where they encounter the Parkinson's teachers and the dancers, and therefore they develop a knowledge about the different aspects of the context and the disease. Also, they have to understand what it means to deal with the freezing or tremor and so on. But what happened with Dario Tortorelli, who did the very first commission, it was in the video you saw that they were wearing sunglasses. They created a sort of armor on the body with sunglasses, and he built the whole piece on the tremor of the performers that somehow created the soundtrack. What happened to Eva, when she was in front of an audience, the tremor disappeared. So she had to fake it to make the piece work, and that was incredible.
Okay,
I guess the perceptions of what they might expect that's coming at them sometimes really is changed around here.
So as I've seen, there's coming more and more dancer in these companies, but we don't see that many choreographers with other backgrounds. And you said, Joel, you understood suddenly that you were the creator. And my question is there a lot of why the choreographer that Kanduko and Skånes Dance Theater, for example, are bringing in? Are you bringing in disabled choreographers? And if you are, yes, good. And if not, why? And if we look, is it important that we also start to see more and more creator choreographers coming from this area? What is your vision then in 10 years? Will that make a bigger, which I then believe, I can say what I believe, the power, of course, will change, and I think it will go quicker, but I might be wrong. So two questions. Yeah. You got them, yeah.
I think, well, number one, yes, it is important to have disabled choreographers. The statistics of becoming a world-renowned choreographer as a disability right now are quite small. So there are a few of them. I can name them, but there are a few. Kanduko has commissioned two very well-known choreographers, as we said, Claire Cunningham and Mark Brew. Why are there so few? Well, I mean...
My theory is that, in general, choreographers often would come out from dance training or from being dancers themselves. And so with lack of access to dance training, it's not necessarily an easy or natural or most. So what's interesting is that out of Kanduka has come quite a lot of dance choreographers. So Mark Brew, Shisato, Minamimura, and actually a lot of the people that have Kate Marsh, Wally O'Brien, Vicky Malin, Sarah, I have about 10 that have been through the company, and so they've learned from being in a repertory company, having the amazing opportunity to work with such experienced choreographers in the room, and sort of then, honing their own trade or their craft from that experience. And the people that haven't been in Kanduko, so Claire Cunningham, Caroline Bowditch, other than have often either taken a very individual route and have had support and kind of interest and found, Bill Shannon in America, have found other people to be mentored by or work with, and it's exciting because that's the other element that would be really boring if they'd all come through Kanduko. It'd be a particular, vision in, and I think that then when the Unlimited happened in 2012, which was part of the Cultural Olympia that leads up to like an Olympic event, there was a bit of a push, and to a certain extent, slightly, sometimes a bit of a push off the cliff in terms of like the amount of expectation being put on disabled makers that hadn't had much training or much experience, but at the same time, we all know that we get put in, the way we grow is by learning the hard way sometimes and being given a chance to take an opportunity that is beyond us, but we sort of jump at it and we have some support in place to kind of help us achieve. So I think that it's necessary and it's happening in different ways, and now it feels like it's happening more and more in terms of this vision about what's happening. 5 years ago, most of the dance agencies and the dance houses were talking about it, and now they are supporting disabled artists to be associate artists or to have residencies or to present work. So that's a real change that I see, especially in the UK, but also in Europe, that has happened in the last 5 years. So hopefully the next 5 is about establishing that more and then growing the next generation, and so that it will change, the landscape will change. It will.
I just want to say at Skånes, we have a program called Lunch Dance, which is really an opportunity for dancers themselves creating work. And in our latest Lunch Dance, Madeleine and Peder, 2 dancers in the company, they have choreographed their own duet. That's part of that program, and is also touring now in the south of Sweden. It's called Dare to Rex. You can go in on the website and look. But I also, just some experience, I'm not going to name names, but also I'm not sure sometimes that when we are a very mainstream repertory company, I'm not sure that disabled choreographers are that interested in working with us. I mean, that's, maybe it's a bit boring because all the dancers basically look the same. So I mean, I think it's two-way, really.
We don't want to work with you.
No, but it has happened.
Sure, yeah.
Claire Cunningham said that when she had worked with us, I'm so bored to go to dance and see the same ones all the time. But now you're changing also.
That's quite mean, I think.
I think she was.
I think she's busy doing her own thing. She's got other work to do.
There's a question at the top. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. Okay, hello. So I'm from Istanbul, and I'm also working with different bodies since 2000. Do we have any kind of network based on this, or we just, based on like disabled? I don't want to use this word because it creates discrimination. But do we have any, I don't know, specific network on it? So do you know what happened in other countries based on this topic?
Not always, no.
So maybe
first of all, I know all languages are different, but I don't think disabled is a bad word. I think it's a
no, it's not because of
clear...
the bad word. It's about how we framed our philosophy, actually. So that's why I don't use it.
There's lots of things online. There's loads of Facebook groups. There's lots of wheelchair ballroom Facebook groups, and there are the National Dance Inclusive Network, which is a huge Facebook group mainly based on dance in the UK, but also and other parts in Europe, yes, there are online networks.
There's the Disability Arts Online, which Ben Evans will talk about later, I'm sure. So there is definitely, and again, in the last few years, I think there's been a surge, especially around Europe, with support from the European Union and the Creative Europe projects to gather networks. So what I was mentioning yesterday about the Moving Beyond Inclusion Network that we are leading, and what British Council is leading on in terms of building the dance houses together, there are definitely networks. But every time we are invited to a new country or to a country, I am always surprised that there are people out there that we don't know about. And I know that you guys are part of another European network which links Germany and Greece and Turkey. But I guess ultimately there is no one website that's going to hold all this information. There is no one local place that is going to be able to, because it's live and it keeps changing. Yeah, so I guess it's about meeting and talking. That's Okay.
So I think that time is out. I just really wanted to ask Roberto one thing. Activism in dance. Could you give us all something to think about before we leave the room? What should we do?
I think it's time to be active. I think what we're facing is a very challenging time. There's flows of winds that tell us that we have to really advocate for our art form, not to be afraid to say, I'm a dancer, I'm a dance artist, I work for the culture of dance. I want to make sure that people understand that the dance changes people's lives. We've seen it, we know it. So I think each of us in our own way have to take responsibility for that and somehow work together with our ecologies to really fight for it. Because what I hear also from colleagues from Germany, there's a very strange, let's say, suggestions from politicians and movements that are really, making us think of what happened in the 20s and 30s. We're not so far from there. But I want to be very optimistic, and I'm sure that networking, sharing experiences, knowledge, and really working together is our weapon. So let's go for it.
Thank you.